So they're coming in. So we're just another 5 minutes. If you want to down. So this is a talk, of course, about another constituent element of the system we use, page forms and cargo, and I'm really interested in getting to know what's new there. So please, Yaron.
Okay. Hi everyone, bonjour à tout le monde. That's my French. Everyone's trying to practice their French here. Yeah, this talk is going to be about cargo and page forms, what's been happening lately. So page forms, an extension, most of you know, I think. It was first released in 2007. I'm the main author of it. It was known until 2016 as semantic forms. I think most people have gotten used to the new name by now. It was never really that semantic, depending on how you look at it. Mostly written by me. Stefan Gamke is credited as a co-author of the extension due to a number of big contributions he made a few years ago. And then there's a lot of other people who have contributed over time. And then Cargo is an extension that was first released in 2015. It's an alternative. Whoa. Oh, okay. Yeah. Hello, hello. Okay, cool. It's an alternative to Semantic MediaWiki. I mean, as far as the high-level definition, the two are pretty much the same. It also lets you store, query, browse, etc., data. This isn't going to be a demo or a real explanation of Cargo. Maybe I should have done that, but later on, if people are interested, I could show some things. The basic thing to view is that for, well, that's I guess the next slide. Yeah, to the end user, they function pretty much the same. If you look at a wiki and you don't look at the special pages or anything, I don't think you can really tell the difference between the two. They both have maps, calendars, charts, and all that stuff. Structurally, Cargo uses tables, while Semantic MediaWiki uses triples, even though they're often stored in MySQL or anything. But that's the basic difference in approach that leads to everything else. And just some of my opinions. These may or may not be controversial. I think, from my view, Cargo is easier to set up and maintain. The lack of property pages is one example of something that makes Cargo easier to maintain, deal with. And it's just one extension versus a number of them in Semantic MediaWiki. The querying is more powerful and faster. Again, these are all my opinions. Semantic MediaWiki is better for linked data. Of course, it has a lot more usage. So if you disagree with any of that, you can yell at me now or later. So recent additions to page forms. I'm just covering everything in the last almost 2 years, year and a half. One really nice one is the addition of support for Visual Editor and TinyMCE. This is something, well, at least with Visual Editor, people have talked about for a long time. So Visual Editor is created by the Wikimedia Foundation for use on Wikipedia and other sites. It's a WYSIWYG editor that's been under development for a long time, and now it's finally pretty stable, and a lot of people like it. TinyMCE is a WYSIWYG editor extension. Confusingly enough, it's based on a BlueSpice extension called Visual Editor, which itself used a JavaScript library called TinyMCE. So now it's just TinyMCE. Both can be used in any page forms text area, and we're fortunate enough here to have pretty much all the people involved in getting both extensions into page forms. Duncan did the vast majority of the work on TinyMCE, and of course there's the BlueSpice people here who originally set up that code, and then Pierre and Clément from Docket helped did, I don't know what percent, a very high percentage of the work for getting Visual Editor into page forms. Yeah, just some screenshots. Here's what it looks like when you have Visual Editor in page forms. You know, imagine typing in there and having all that formatting. And then TinyMCE has its own display, which is similar but a different set of icons, and they both work pretty well. So yeah, you can have any number of these within a form. I'm not sure if you can combine the two. I don't know why you'd ever want to do that, but just briefly for TinyMCE, if you want to do that, you just need to install this other extension called TinyMCE. For Visual Editor, you need to install Visual Editor, which is itself a kind of a hassle at this point, but I mean, it's not impossible. And then a little extension called VE for all, which is the thing that, it's really cool. That's the thing that a lot of people thought couldn't be done, which is letting you embed that code in just a regular text area, not the standard edit page. So that's the first one. The second thing that was added to page forms a while ago, last summer, I guess, is a page called Special Multi-Page Edit. When you first go there, it shows you a list of forms, and then if you click on any of those, you see this spreadsheet interface. This is kind of messy looking. The basic idea is it shows all the pages that it does its best guess looking at templates and so forth. It shows all the pages that use that form, and then it just has a single spreadsheet row for each of them. So it's a great way to be able to quickly edit a lot of pages at once. And so you click on any one of them and you get all the inputs. The fewer the fields in a form, the more it makes sense to have something like this. If you have 30 fields, this becomes very I don't know, unwieldy. I don't know how widely used this is, but I think it's cool. Yeah, I just have no idea. The third is something that wasn't, I just sort of added it in without a lot of discussion. I haven't gotten that much feedback on it either way. If you have multiple instance templates, hopefully you know what those are. Sometimes those can become very big, and if you have a lot of them, it really becomes difficult to edit. So now, if the total height of all these multiple instances is beyond a certain height, 800 pixels by default, then whatever ones you're not working on at the moment just become collapsed, and it just shows the values for it. And this comes from, if you're wondering about this data set, this comes from my wiki Discourse DB, which shows political commentary. And you can disable it if you just set the height to be a negative number or something. But anyway, I think it's cool. Yeah, if anyone has any comments on that, I'm curious to hear them. Yeah, editable calendars. This is the newest feature. I wish there was more of a, did I put in a screenshot? No. Okay, imagine a calendar where you click on a date and this pop-up form pops up. I thought there was, oh, okay, it's basically impossible. On my On the original slides, you can actually see the calendar where the black square is. So yeah, you click on a calendar, you get a pop-up. Click on a date, you get a pop-up form like that. You enter in all the details, and there it shows up. And then you can move it around and slide it around, or increase or decrease the width of it in the calendar. And then each of those events becomes one instance of a multiple instance template. So you can't do that with individual event pages. You can only do it with individual event rows, templates within a single page. The other way would be great to add as well. Yeah, what else did I want to say about that? It would be cool to have something like this for maps, too. Yeah, doesn't exist yet. Additions to cargo, some new data types were added. Rating is just, it's like integer, it's just a 1 to 5 or whatever it is thing, but it has a star. Within page forms, there's also a rating input type. Maybe I should have mentioned that. I'm not sure it's in the last 2 years. Rating is for ratings. Then there's a start date and end date. I think actually Semantic MediaWiki could benefit from that. Being able to say this specifically is a start date for this event, and this specifically is the end date, and then it allows a bunch of things like validation when you're typing into forms. It can make sure the end date comes after the start date, things like that. And then there's the same for date time types. Drill down. Cargo presents a special page called Special Drill Down, which is equivalent to Special Browse Data, which comes from the Semantic Drill Down extension. I don't know if that helps at all to anyone. So you can do regular drill down, but then if you specify a parent table, in this case, the opinions table has the item that it came from as a parent, and sorry if this is completely incomprehensible. Basically, you can also drill down on fields from another table in one table. So in this case, you can drill down through specifics of opinions, but then you can also drill down on the more general stuff of the opinion item that it came from. This was recently done. Cargo has a page called Special Cargo Query, which is equivalent to Semantic MediaWiki's Special Ask. It used to be quite bare bones. Now it has auto-completion, just about the stuff that Special Ask offers as well. And then you can see, it's a little hard to read at the bottom there, the user selected a format, in this case dynamic table, and then it shows the additional fields specific to just that format. So it's cool now. I mean, it lets you create queries pretty easily with a minimum of typing or thought, I think. I gotta give a shout out to Google. They have a program called Google Summer of Code, which lets students from around the world, mostly India, but that's another story, work on open source projects during the summer, and the slight majority of the features I talked about actually came from last summer and the summer before. It's been a great program, and a few of the people involved with Semantic MediaWiki and some other extensions got their start through that, including Yaron, who's not here, but he was my student back in the day, 10 years ago or so. So yeah, I mean, these are just, it's sort of a random collection. There is kind of an overriding goal, I think, which is to try to make it as simple as possible. So ideally, the Platonic ideal is you define your data structure, and then everything else comes out of that. So you don't have to define forms or filters or queries, maybe. It just knows, what the correct thing should be. Specifically, I think the next step I really would like to see is automatic forms where you don't have to define them. You just say, pages in this category should have a form. And then it goes and says, well, this category uses these templates or this template, and then it actually creates that form. The idea is people could override that by defining forms, but you can at least start out with no form definition, and maybe it's good enough. Maybe it's not. You know, even if it works, even if it's good enough only 50% of the time, I think that would be a great improvement. So I don't know if anyone remembers this. There was an extension called Automatic Semantic Forms that did this about 10 years ago, part of the SMW Plus package, which a few people may have heard of. It had limited functionality. It was, I don't know how well it worked, but yeah, there's been a bunch of improvements that I think will allow it to work better than it could have before. Some of the features I mentioned before can be involved in this. So back to that parent table thing that may or may not have been clear. So if you have, you know, recipes, if you have pages about recipes, and then within each page you have a multiple instance template that lets you define the specific ingredient rows, you know, 3 cups of flour or whatever, then if you specify that the ingredient has a table of recipe, has a parent table of recipe, then the form, page forms can say, oh, okay, that means that you need to have a multiple instance template for ingredients within the recipe form. Yeah, that kind of thing. So yeah, so even the presence of multiple instance templates would not necessarily prohibit you from from having an automatically generated form. And then similarly, this is another one about multiple instance templates. You know, if it sees that there's a date or dates within that multiple instance template, then we can use that editable calendar that I semi-showed before. This is all easier to do with Cargo than Semantic MediaWiki, I think, because Cargo explicitly defines, you can explicitly declare the data structure ahead of time. You say this template has this set of fields with each one with this type, that kind of thing. It's not explicitly defined in Semantic MediaWiki. SMW had, or maybe still has, a parser function. I think it's gone now, called declare, which essentially let you do that and say, you know, these are the properties for this template or category. I don't know. In any case, it may be worth, well, just something for the Semantic MediaWiki developers out there. It may be worth having that, so you know, to get the benefits of that as far as automatic forms. That's it. So yeah, anything anybody wants to talk about as far as Cargo and page forms? Talk about it. I can show a demo or no.
Thanks, Sharon. Has anybody ever had Cargo and Semantic MediaWiki working on the same wiki? Because it seems the two have different sort of strengths that you could make use of.
Yeah, they can. You can have them both running on the same wiki. Was that a question or?
Do you know anybody who has? How did it go?
Yeah, who was it? Snipedia, I think, has both. It's a site. It's like does genetic information. Yeah, Cindy, or anybody. What's going on? Oh,
I do.
You use Cargo and Semantic MediaWiki.
The wiki that you saw earlier, the EMA wiki, it uses Cargo for most of the data, structured data, but it uses Semantic MediaWiki because Title Icon doesn't support Cargo yet, and so it uses Semantic MediaWiki just to set the title icons. There's a little bit of an interesting backstory to that there was one version of Semantic MediaWiki where there was explicitly a variable that defaulted to false that would disable Semantic MediaWiki if it detected that Cargo was installed at the same time. About a year ago, I tried to install, so the version of the EMA wiki hasn't been updated in a while because I'm no longer there to update it. But I tried to install a new version of Semantic MediaWiki, so I'm curious if Karsten has any comment about that, because I noticed that the variable.
I think it's not. I think it's been removed. Yeah.
But I noticed that Semantic MediaWiki would not work. So, but that could very well have been my configuration error.
Oh, okay.
But I could not get Cargo and Semantic MediaWiki to work together. But it used to also disable itself with Wikibase, and so we had the demonstration of Wikibase working with Semantic MediaWiki. So clearly they coexist now. So again, that could very well have been my configuration problem.
A heavy user of page forms as I am, I always wonder when you want to make sure that some kind of data is entered. I usually do it this way, that people save the page, and then in the template I can care about what have they entered. I can display errors or make them aware of you entered something that's wrong here. You mentioned it briefly because page forms does not have this feature. Do you have any plans on implementing something like this is a date, and this date has to be of a certain range, or this should be only 10 characters long, or whatever? These constraints of people entering something. It's not in page forms, and I like it that way because you can do it after you save. But it's also, it might be a very interesting approach to have some functionality like this in there, where you specify what data you want to be added.
Well, there's quite a bit of validation that you can do in page forms. I mean, you can say that something's mandatory. If you're asking specific, I don't know. I mean, and you can specify, there's a regex input type that lets you specify that it has to be checked against a regular expression if it's, to make sure it's 10 or more characters or whatever it is. Yeah, I don't know. Beyond that, sure, anything can be added. I don't know if you have something specific in mind. Okay.
So Darren, to follow up on what Cindy was saying, Darren Welsh from NASA asked about, why doesn't page forms and Semantic MediaWiki work together?
Cargo.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Cargo, yes. I guess no one else has any experience with that because
No, I use both, and actually I think they work perfectly together. There's
no reason why
one feature I miss in Cargo, and I was informing you on that. I store knowledge entities on individual pages, and I type these knowledge entities by declaring specific templates. And those templates share the same property, because a couple of, you've got sort of domain or knowledge entity type agnostic properties. Now, if you want to query for any value or specific values of those properties across templates, you would have to explicitly, in the query, declare what table it should query. That's correctly understood?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot like SQL in that way. Sure.
And that's one of the wonderful strengths I think Semantic MediaWiki has, because you don't have to. You just tell it, give me anything. If you find it anywhere, return it. But I guess there would be maybe, if you do some SQL magic, get around that, right?
Yeah, just do a join. I don't know. Yeah.
Joins are a little expensive.
Not even a join. Just do a separate query in HTML.
Exactly, like this. So, but that's where I see the core difference for me. But I think if you put the declare parser functions on a template that is used elsewhere or in another way, that wouldn't hamper in any way what's going on. I mean, I think they work perfectly together, and cool. I use both because Cargo is a great interface to actually a relational database, whereas Semantic MediaWiki is more, closer to the original semantic web thing. But the semantic web is inherently pretty complex. So there's quite a lot of people who wouldn't, want to dive into this. So you're right that to 80 or 95%, it's identical.
I saw that you can edit directly inside the table. the row. You can edit the fields inside the tables. And
oh yeah, the special multi-page edit.
The spreadsheet maybe. There is okay, exactly. And this is really interesting, but it's also available for cargo. Or you can use this always also on Semantic MediaWiki.
No, yeah, definitely. It's part of page forms. You don't need any other extension installed for it to work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, although it uses those to figure out to know the input type for each. That this is a date, so it should have a date input. So I can use Semantic MediaWiki or Cargo for that. Yeah. So,
hi. Maybe I'm not sure if it is relevant to you or not, but since you worked a lot with template, and I'm new in Semantic MediaWiki actually, so I have actually askings about that. Do you have any experience to use AngularJS or the React.js inside the Semantic MediaWiki? Or did you try these modern frameworks?
no.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone else?
I've heard Vue is the cool one, though, now. Anyway.
Otherwise, Yaron, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
So, Robert? Yeah, Robert is actually addressing one of my concerns that whenever I set up a wiki, I'm very excited about it. It's like digging a tunnel into a mountain, but not strutting it and just enjoy digging, and then it falls apart, together behind you. So this is about securing a Semantic MediaWiki or a MediaWiki installation, which should be best practices in any case. So please, Robert.
Hello? Okay. Seems to work. So, let me... Okay. So, hello everybody. I thought I first introduce myself, as not everybody of you might know me. So, yeah, before I start, let's talk about me. What did I do, or what am I doing now? So about 10 years ago, I finished my studies at the University of Applied Sciences in Deggendorf in the direction media technology and a focus of media informatics. Nowadays it's called Deggendorf Institute of Technology. Sounds a little bit cooler. Yeah, since then, actually, I've been working for Hallo, Welt, Medienwerkstatt GmbH, and probably straight from the beginning on the Blue Spice MediaWiki distribution. So I have accumulated quite a number of years working with MediaWiki and MediaWiki-related stuff. Nowadays, I'm team lead product and software development. That's my current position. And yeah, I've got the honor to be here and to give a few talks. In my daily work, I'm doing a lot of product work, but also customer work, which is actually always a very interesting field. It's about integrations, it's about data migrations, so bringing data from some arbitrary data source, like Word documents or Lotus Notes databases, into MediaWiki. That's something that our customers do quite often. And yeah, of course, also authorization and authentication scenarios, which are, can be very different based on the customer. And yeah, of course, I love going to conferences, especially being here at the Semantic MediaWiki is always much fun. Okay, that's all about me. Let's move on to the actual talk. Okay. Oh, that's huge. Okay, I'm going to talk about fundamental security. So the original title is a little bit longer, but I stripped it down to that. When I was asked to give that talk, the basic description was this: learn more about SSL authentication, extensions, API, external data, CommonJS. So when I looked at this list of beautiful words, I was thinking about what can I actually provide you with. And so I tried to cluster these things into what I've got here. So I want to talk about server and network security a little bit. I'm not that much of a server guy. Application and code security. Yes, I think I can talk about this a little bit. And at the end, about content security. So everything that is on the wiki. So we're coming from the big picture, the server that is the software running on, to the actual application, and then down to the content level. So the first element of this nice list was SSL. So I was thinking about what can I tell about SSL. I don't want to steal your time with talking about technical details, which I'm actually not that experienced in. So I will concentrate myself to the question when to use SSL. And I have created a decision map for you that says when to use SSL, HTTPS in this case. So sorry, that's bad wording here. So when to use HTTPS. Is your wiki public? Yes, of course, you need to use HTTPS. If it is internal, please also use it then. So it's the year 2019, I think no web application should be run without secure transport layer security. So if it comes to the technical details here, well, there are basically two approaches. If it is a public wiki, you should at least use something like Let's Encrypt, which provides you with certificates for free. The downside is that you need to regularly update the certificate. They have only a very limited time span, but that's all pretty well described, and there are a lot of tools out there that help you with doing exactly this. And of course, if you're on a business intranet, then you should also go for HTTPS encryption, and you, in the worst case, you go for a self-signed certificate, so you just create some kind of certificate, which will probably cause issues with clients on the business network, because the clients usually don't trust self-signed certificates, and might have limited functionality if there's a self-signed certificate. In the best case, you have some certification authority within your network that you can use to provide proper certificate to a server. Yeah, that's almost all that I can and I want to say about HTTPS and SSL. Let's talk about the server access. So that's the basic security. Who can access the server, and how can this person access the server? In most cases, I believe, we have Linux-based servers. Some of our customers actually use Windows, but I won't bring this up here. So on Linux servers, you can say there are a few important rules that you follow. One is you should disable the root login. Actually, quite a number of distributions nowadays do that. So people should not be able to actually log in as a root, as the administrator user. That's easy. The second one is you should probably not use a username and password authentication, but you should go for a public-private key mechanism to access the server. This allows for much stronger passwords that are not easily attackable by brute force or dictionary attacks. So that's basically a very important thing to have using key-based authentication. Another thing can be security by obscurity, which basically just is changing the SSH port to a non-standard number, which actually reduces, especially when you're on the internet, it reduces a lot of attack attempts, because there are thousands of, maybe 10,000s of scripts out there that just try to randomly access SSH ports. So you can silence them by just changing that port to a non-standard number. And then there are additional tools. I just want to mention one that we have used just recently, that is fail to ban. So if you actually see some attacks on your machine, some login attempts, dictionary attacks, whatever, you can use the fail to ban tool. So as far as I've read, this is not just limited to SSH access, but you can also use the different applications or different services that you can protect with fail to ban. What does fail to ban do? Well, it blacklists some IP address, basically. So if some IP address fails multiple times in a row with authenticating, it will just be banned. Or in the first place, it will have a little cooldown time. Okay, better. Still, yeah, does work. Okay, so these are basic ideas about preventing or improving security with server access. The next level will be talking about the operating system and the services that are hosted on that machine. So this is actually something that got some attention in the media just recently. You should look that all the services that you have on your machine properly set up. Are properly set up to not listen to outbound connections, with an exception to the web server, of course, because the web server is that what you want to expose. But just recently, there were more than one issues with, for example, Elasticsearch instances that were not configured correctly and opened their connection to outbound connections, and this can lead to data leakage and information disclosure. So please be sure that you set up the services, all the services that are required to run the wiki, in a way that they are not available from outside, besides the web server, of course. The next important thing that we can say about each and every computer system on the world, be it a smartphone, be it a desktop or laptop computer, and of course a server, is the best guard against attacks is always an updated system. So if it is possible in your situation to run unattended updates, this is recommended. So it's not always possible, I have to admit, but unattended updates are in general a good thing because you do not need to bother about regularly updating your system software, but it will do it automatically. And last but not least, you should always monitor your servers. So especially if you've got more than one, you should use some proper tools like in Singa, for example, that allows you to monitor the state of the server. That's not just the health of the server, like file system disk capacity or CPU load, but it is also regarding updates and maybe even attack detection. Okay. So the last section here would be to restrict the access to the application. So until now we talked about the server itself and the services. Now we're getting close to the application. So to prevent access, you can prevent access to the application and therefore limit the abilities of an attacker to actually attack the application, not the server, but the application. The application may be flawed. There might be security holes in there, and the less people actually have access to the application, the better it is. So for a public wiki, this is of course not a very good idea. So a public wiki will just be open, but especially in the business world, we have a very limited set of users that are accessing information. So one idea could be to, I think I haven't put it to the slides, would be to restrict access to a certain IP or an IP range. That is especially easy if the wiki is hosted in the internet, but should only be accessed by a certain company location, for example, because they have most likely fixed IP addresses that you can filter for. You can use other kinds of access restriction. That it would be, for example, the Kerberos or NTLM. We had NTLM yesterday. Methods, or even client certificates. Well, Kerberos and NTLM is usually only an option if you're in a business intranet. For a wiki hosted on the internet, you won't be able to do that because it requires a communication channel to the Kerberos server, which is hard to create and maybe even a security issue. Client SSL certificates are a nice option that we just recently learned about. The downside on this is that you need to actually deploy these certificates to all the clients. But if there is an infrastructure available, some companies have such things, this can be quite a nice solution to not just secure the application, but to also gain some comfort for your users, because these things can be used not just to restrict access to the application, but also to authenticate the incoming user against the application. So this serves a double purpose. There's another bullet point on the slide that is be aware regarding the services. That is, so nowadays the wiki consists of some kind of a microservice architecture. There are multiple services that might need to access the application, for example, using the Action API, which is an HTTP endpoint, and therefore some access control, like mentioned above, could stop these, could prevent these services from working. So, for example, if you've got the parsoid server running, you will probably need to create a bypass for these kind of services, so they are still allowed to communicate with the wiki application, even though they're not carrying some authentication information like a certificate or Kerberos ticket or whatever. Okay. Now we have come to the application security. So this is the wiki itself, of course. I recommend to use long-term support versions. Well, you could also argue that you can use the latest versions to be on the spearhead of the development. That's true, but the real, especially in the business world, but I think also for most other wikis, it is true that you don't want to update that quickly. MediaWiki creates quite a number of releases a year, and especially when you've got a large set of extensions and maybe some customizations, you might be reluctant on participating in this race, because you will always have to check for breaking changes and stuff like that, which is a lot of work. So my recommendation is to stick to the LTS versions. The good thing is that Wikimedia Foundation has these LTS versions, not just for the MediaWiki core, but also for the most important extensions. Other extensions do not have such a strategy, unfortunately, but yeah, at least for MediaWiki core you can do this. Yeah, the next element would be if you look for extensions, because plain MediaWiki core is yeah, it's a little bit poor in features, so we'll probably want to install extensions. If you want to install extensions, look out for WMF extensions, extensions that are created and maintained by the Wikimedia Foundation, of course, or some bigger contributors like Semantic MediaWiki, of course. But these extensions, especially WMF extensions, as they are probably running on the big Wikipedia projects, are security reviewed, so it's quite secure to use them. And of course, if you look for extensions, please only use maintained extensions. That's the most important thing. Otherwise, it's very likely that you have some kind of a security hole in there, and you don't want to have that. Okay, now coming to some other topics here. So I want to cover the initial agenda. So within the application, within the content of the application, there are also potential security risks. First of all, this is the MediaWiki Common.js page. Most of you probably know that. It's a wiki article that allows you to specify, to add arbitrary JavaScript code, and this JavaScript code will be executed every time on every page load. While this is a nice feature to add functionality, it is also dangerous, because JavaScript, you can do everything with JavaScript, right? So please make sure that you have the permissions set up properly. By default, they are set up correctly, but make sure that only people that you really trust have access to these pages and are able to modify these, because JavaScript is the most dangerous thing that you can have. The same goes for gadgets, of course. Gadgets is a little bit better because the user can activate it or deactivate them. They are not loaded on every page load. Well, they can be loaded as a default, but that's the same topic here. And yeah, one of the words in the initial sentence were external data, and in preparation of this talk, I have looked into the code of external data, and well, I did not do a complete security review, of course, but I think it's quite okay. So I don't see any big issues. The only thing that I want to mention here is be aware that when you configure external data, for example, with some user accounts to access a database, that all the data that this user can read can be accessed by your wiki. This might sound a little bit stupid, but sometimes people don't have this on their radar. They are just saying, okay, here I've got my company database. Here I use this read-only user. Go for it. And they forget that it's not just the product table that they want to query, but it's something else. So please be aware that if you configure external data and you need to specify the username and password, that everything that these username and password, or these users can see on the external data source are queryable on the wiki. Okay. Well, application security, that's, now it's going to be a little bit sophisticated. You can do security reviews yourself, but it's hard. And these are just some examples. It's not a complete, comprehensive list of things that you can check, but if you actually run over an extension that you're not sure if it might be an issue, you can have do some kind of simple security review yourself. The first thing is you should check after you've activated the extension. You should check the network panel of your browser and have a look which resources are loaded. In most cases, this wouldn't be a big issue, but there are extensions out there that load external scripts. And for the external scripts, it's the same problem as it is for the MediaWiki Common JS, for example. They might be dangerous. So at least you should know whether or not an extension that you're using requests external resources, and then you can think about if this is okay for you or not. Especially when you're in a secured business intranet, this might actually be a problem because maybe outbound resource calls are not even permitted by the network, which will cause in a failure of that extension. Then, of course, you can have a look at the code base. But as I said, these are just some ideas that you can have a look. So you can check if, so let's say, if you know that the extension will list you some pages, you can have a look for user can. That's an error. That's PHP code actually. User can, or maybe the error with is allowed. These are the permission checks that the MediaWiki framework allows, and by just looking at the code and searching for these things, you can have a quick overview if the author actually tried to do some permission checks or not. So if you know this thing puts out a list of pages and you do not find a user can, for example, in there, then the author most likely ignored permission checks in the extension. Very dangerous, for example, is also the error query snippet here. If you find something like this in an extension, it can be dangerous. It doesn't need to be, but it can be because this allows arbitrary SQL statements to be executed, and if the extension developer did not properly escape the input values, this can lead to a security issue. And here the last line that might be interesting is everything that is put out to the user, everything that is sent to the user to the browser should be sanitized and escaped. And an indicator whether the extension does this or not is the HTML : snippet, for example. This doesn't, I don't say that this is the only way to do it, but that's an indicator. It doesn't mean that an extension that doesn't use these functions is insecure by default. But okay, of course, if you're writing extensions, you should follow these things. Yeah. You should, when you're working with a list of titles, you should use the user can checks and maybe remove things from the output if this check fails. You should do your sanitizing, especially when dealing with user inputs. So everything that the user can send, be it in an API call or be it in a form submission, must be sanitized before it should go to any output. And the last element is quite interesting. That's prevent information disclosure. That's something that I see quite often, is that in an error case, the developer thinks he's a nice guy and he will display all the relevant information to the administrator or to the user. But be aware that passing stuff like paths, for example, file system paths, is an information disclosure. So let's imagine you have an extension, you put something in, the extension crashes and it reports to the administrator that some arbitrary file is not writable, for example, and it actually gives the path to that file, then that is a serious information disclosure that can lead to attacks. Okay, yeah, then we are moving on to content security. First element would be authentication, authorization. As Mark did most of these things yesterday, I will not talk too much about this. So yeah, there are a lot of authentication and authorization extensions available. Well, if you've got any user pool available, like a SAML or an LDAP or something like that, I would recommend actually using one of these authentication methods and maybe even disable something like local login to make sure that people cannot create their own accounts without being listed in that user pool. Of course, the next thing would be authorization. So you can check, I think Cindy did a lot of extensions here. You can check in a number of ways whether a user should be able to log in or to access the wiki, for example, based on their email address. If they're providing an email address or an email address in the username, you can have a look that you can check that this is only for a certain domain enabled, something like that. If you're using SAML or LDAP, you can check for user groups, for example, and restrict access on that level. And for the other ones, actually, I don't know. So that needs to be investigated. Okay. Another thing regarding content security is that you can check your entry point configuration. So by default, the MediaWiki code base is put into the web root of the server, or maybe in a subfolder of the web root, which exposes all the files in this directory to the web. And you can, for example, make configurations that only certain entry points are actually callable, which lowers the risk of some arbitrary script being executed and being a security hole. I have listed some of them here, IMG, Auth, index.php, AP.php, and so on. These are the most important entry points in the MediaWiki core software. Some extensions might add additional ones, but these are the important ones. maybe I say something about image auth. So by default, MediaWiki will just load files, all kinds of files that you've uploaded, be it an image, be it a PDF file, whatever. It will serve them directly from the upload directory and the upload path. These are two configuration variables. Now, especially when you work in a private wiki, you will probably not want to people to be able to access these files directly, but you will need to have a proxy script. You will need to have you will want to have the images and files being delivered by a script, and that's the img auth.php file. And you can, to prevent access to the original files, you can also move the images directory out of that webroot directory using the wg upload directory. Okay, so regarding the entry points, I already mentioned the most important ones. Be aware that there are some extensions out there that might load additional CSS or additional JavaScript from the extension directory immediately or directly without using an entry point. Well, this needs to be decided in every case, basically. You need to check if that happens and if it's okay to load these things, or if you need to find some access solution here. And the next list item actually it's also very important. Just recently there were some news on the security portals. It's quite frequent that people forget to remove .git directories or similar structures from their folders, especially when you're doing some automated code base control, which I know a lot of people are doing. If you do not prevent access to these kinds of directories or remove them, attackers may be able to access the index of that repository and may be able to read out sensitive data that might be in the commit messages or somewhere else. And last but not least, nowadays there are not just PHP configuration files in the application, but it's also JSON files. And be aware that a JSON file by default is delivered by a web server. So if you have got configuration file in JSON format, please make sure that it is located outside of the web root, or it is prevented by other means, because otherwise these configuration is always sensitive, could be fetched using the web server. Okay, now we are on the wiki itself. So we have successfully logged in. We have passed the authorization part. And now you have got additional ways to secure your content. To be honest, it's not very much that you can do. So there are a few extensions available here. For example, access control extension, which is actually maintained. Unfortunately, I do not have much experience with it, so I cannot give you a recommendation or not. Then the good old lockdown extension, which has been used for many years by a lot of people. It had some troubles in the past year, but I think thanks to Mark, these have been fixed, so it should work currently. And yeah, there's BlueSpice too. So in the BlueSpice MediaWiki distribution, we also have some access control layer that allows you to prevent access based on the namespace, which is a very similar functionality to what lockdown provides. Also be aware that these additions may be bypassed by other extensions. So for example, even if you have namespace-based restrictions set up by lockdown, you will still be able to query certain data from these namespaces using Semantic MediaWiki, because Semantic MediaWiki by default is not aware of such measures. So that's important to know. If you have access control functionality enabled, be aware that some extensions might not respect them and just bypass them. So in that case, yeah, well, you need to find another kind of setup and maybe move that kind of content into a separate wiki instance, into a separate wiki, and secure it in another way. Okay, so now I've put together some links for you. Nothing special, nothing that you couldn't find by just searching on mediawiki.org, of course. But I think these are the most important ones that I have seen so far, and I wanted to share with you. And basically, that's all from my side. I want to thank you, and if there are any comments or questions, please go ahead.
So you were talking about SSL. It is possible to use Let Encrypt on servers that are behind firewalls using DNS authentication method that they have.
Great.
So you can do that, and that'll work with your browsers and everything.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't understand the thing with removing the .git directories. I mean, what's the worst that can happen if you keep those?
There have been attacks actually that have read the contents of such a Git repository. It's not very simple, but it can be done. And there might be information included in the commit messages or anything else that's sensitive.
Okay,
Can happen.
yeah.
So there have been cases in the past.
Yeah.
Mark.
They can just read. They could look at your code and find vulnerabilities to exploit. That's basic. I mean, and unless you're really confident that your code is.
So yes, I have an additional check for the system administrators. When some system administrators do copy backup of the local settings .php.
.back or something, yeah.
Yes, doing this, they copy, for example, in local setting .php .back, and the effect of this is that this backup file is readable.
That's a very good addition. So be aware that a web server will deliver all kind of stuff if it is named badly. So if you have a .back or .back2 or .new or .old or whatever you might come up with, these things might be fetchable through web interface, and these things obviously contain sensitive information. Yes.
Anyone else? No. So, Robert, thank you very much. I was very happy. Especially that you made us aware that there's a false sense of security. You know, if we add mechanisms that we think secures everything, and then you add one extension, and actually everything is undermined. So now we have Matteo and Gabriele. I'm very happy to now see, after listening to your talk in San Francisco, which was a use case and a usage example, and now I think I asked Matteo actually to show us, and also with a showcase, two of the main extensions he was referring to.
And this is for, okay. Okay, here we are, here I am. Hi everyone, I'm Matteo Busanelli. I'm here with my colleague Gabriele Cornacchia. And we I'm really happy to be here for the second time and at the Semantic MediaWiki conference. And we work for an independent IT consulting firm that mainly deal with consulting on IT architecture, delivery, and security, advisory, and also knowledge management. And all this kind of consultancy is mainly for banking, insurance, and or public administration. So we talk about big enterprises mainly. Just something about me. I was a researcher for the Italian National Research Agency on semantic web. So semantic web is really my extraction and my topic. And since 2008, I work for imola Informatica as advisor on enterprise knowledge management. And we apply Semantic MediaWiki in many situations. As I said before, in IT service management for a bank. Imagine a bank has a huge amount of data about how the IT should serve the business, and IT governance is really important. So the IT architecture support, document management, but also enterprise architecture, as I talk about in San Francisco. GDPR is also a topic that in this moment we are dealing with, and platform for tourism, like the portal for our city, Imola, or the association of the best borghi little city in Italy. Okay, but today we talk about two extensions that we developed and that we maintain. The first one, and is really tied with the last speech, and thanks Robert for the presentation, and is semantic auth profiling. That is an extension for authorizing, not authenticating, users against for each category, and also giving specific four-page administration role. It's really important the fact that we need to specify in each category of the wiki who can read, write, or edit, delete, etc. And the other extension is a Sparql result format, and it's mainly for generating diagrams, graph, and data analytics reporting, dashboard from an arbitrary endpoint. Mainly the endpoint connected to the MediaWiki. We use directly the synchronization of the MediaWiki with a Blaze graph, for example, and we use Sparql to query and generate this kind of diagram because Sparql is much powerful than Ask. Okay, semantic auth profiling. Why we need another one extension for authorizing on Semantic MediaWiki pages? Because we use Semantic MediaWiki as a collaborative platform, and in different cases, many purposes, but always in context of a big enterprises. So our clients need always ask us, no, we can't give all the wiki to all people. We need to separate and say this part of the pages should be viewed by the ICT strategy, but not from the project manager. And so we have different organizational units that access to the wiki, and they have different roles for a specific page, for example. So we need something like that, per category profiling, to set or unset permission for a MediaWiki group. So we are talking about the group that we can define normally in the MediaWiki, but on specific categories. So for example, we want to say, okay, IT strategy managers can view, create, edit, move, or delete pages of kind of type project, because they are the strategy and they can. But service manager or application manager only can view these kind of pages. But they have to, and the portfolio manager that is specified for the project management can view, create, edit, move, or delete. A guest, for example, can another view, create, can do nothing. The other functionality that we need is per page administration that overcome the category profiling, because we can say that we have an owner of something, and this is a semantic property, so we can specify that a project have a project manager. And we want to say, okay, if this project has this project manager should be also the admin of the page. So we have to map, the extension could map a semantic property, an arbitrary semantic property, on the as page admin property that is known by the extension. And this is made mainly using template. So this part is not so automatic. You have to manually set this kind of mapping wherever you want to use this. The extension mainly use hooks, so intercept all the actions, and using the before page display or MediaWiki perform action, decide, starting from the profiling config that we made in a separated file or in local setting, if you can or not access to the page. Okay, I said that you can specify all permission for a specific category and a specific group, and also you can use a wildcard to set or unset action permission globally to all categories, and then unset or set permission for single category. That is for implementing a sort of black or white list. But just we can see an example. The first step, or the zero step, is to open, and this is maybe a little problem about security, open the base permission, for example, edit permission, because we need that extension could close the permission. And what we have, the problem for us is that the extension cannot open a permission that is closed at the MediaWiki level. So if we say everyone can edit pages, the permission can't make edit to someone else based on the configuration. So we had to trust in the extension, in this case, and open this kind of permission for having the extension effectively manage this kind of permission. But okay, we have to create a group like we can do normally in the wiki, maybe using an existing user, an existing group like user, and we have to set the default permission, the base permission. So this is the way that we secure the fact that a user doesn't belong to a specific group, or the extension has no information about what a user can do. We can say, okay, if you don't know nothing about the user, no edit, no create, no view, or move. Or if you want, you can open this basic permission. So this is the core of the configuration that you can put, as I said, in the local setting or in a separate file that you can import in local setting. So you have to use a specific variable for action. So the semantic health profiling view categories, edit, create, and move, and then use the two-dimensional array to specify group, category, and true or false if you want that, for example, could view or edit. You can see for edit, you can say semantic health profiling edit categories for group service manager on category project false, so they can edit projects. It's really simple. This is just a real example that we used on our client. And if you want to say IT managers can view, create, and edit pages of all categories but can't delete nothing, we can use the wildcard. So we can say in this way, view for all categories, create for all categories, edit for all categories, but false for the delete on all categories. And if you want to say that portfolio managers can view all categories but only create, edit, and move project pages, we have to do something like that. You can say view for all categories true, and create for all categories false. So we close all on every category, but open only the create permission for the project. Okay, this is really useful for us because in two steps you can block or open only the categories that we want. Okay. Talking about the page permission, so we have to specify, we want to specify on a single page who is the administrator of this page. We can use a template, and imagine you can have a property like as project manager for the project. We have only to specify, copy all values from project manager property into the as page admin. So we clone the person in charge of management of the project as a page admin. Just an example, project, as a project manager, a person. When I say person, I say not the user. I'm talking about a page of category person, so of maybe fourth person. And the template copy the value of this page in the page admin. And if the email, here is the trick, is equal to the email of the user, then the user can edit the page. This is a strong requirement because we have to match the semantic representation of person with the system user logging in. And we can use the email or username, but we have in such way have to match because the extension know who is the user logged in, and have to match if this user is the same person in charge of project management in this case. And to use this kind of functionality, you have to manually create a property as page admin now, and manually configure the mapping. So only where you want to use the per page administration, take the template and make this mapping from a custom property, a semantic property, to the as admin property. And obviously, you have to associate potentially each MediaWiki user to a page of category person. So you need a category person or something like that. And email of each category person must be the same of the corresponding MediaWiki user, or you can use also a username. We have tested this on a client that uses LDAP. So all groups are automatically imported from LDAP, and the association of user and group is made from LDAP, and then the extension could make this kind of mapping. This is really a work in progress, but already in use. And we are making some refactoring for release the extension in the right format. So we need to test all security issue against the page security issue with authorization extension. And we want to externalize some configuration, some other configuration, like the page admin property as admin, and the mapping, the way of mapping the user, so email or username. Extension doesn't really hide the edit menu, so when you try to click on menu and you are not allowed, you can say a forbidden message. And our dream is to have a guide for this kind of preferences and configuration, just like having a new tab in the preferences page, or a special semantic of profiling, and we are working on this. These are the extension page that we have already published, the Git repository, and the developer, that is not me. And we are trying to maintain and upgrade always this kind of extension, but absolutely feedback and suggestion, correction are really welcome. Now it's your turn.
Thank you. Okay. Hi everybody. Second half. I'm Gabriele Cornacchia, and I'm a software developer and IT consultant at Imola Informatica since 2011. And I've been working on the Semantic MediaWiki ecosystem since 2015 on different projects. I will talk to you about the Sparql result format. What is it? It's a free and open source extension to MediaWiki that lets you query different Sparql endpoints and represent output data in various formats. It's based on different open source JavaScript charting and visualization libraries like jQueryplot, Cytoscape.js, and D3.js. And it can produce several output formats, like bar chart, pie and donuts, bubble, HTML and CSV file, tree map, and graphs. And that's the main reason why we developed this extension. We will see a live example on the demo later on. So why Sparql result format? We wanted to allow our customers to see and interact with data, not only with the flagged HTML tables, but I have to admit that our customers really do love tables and spreadsheets. We also wanted...
Excel is the primary way to consult data.
We also wanted to overcome the syntax limit of the Ask queries. So here comes Sparql as a standard way to query semantic data. But our customers' data consists of a complex network of related entities that require a particular output format. So back in time, in January 2016, similar extension did not exist. We mentioned these two that appeared later in the same year, Sparql charts and linked wiki visualization. Also, we didn't want server-side generated images like GraphViz does, so we decided and started coding. So, Sparql result format simply makes available magic words, one per format, to be used directly inside the MediaWiki page. It can query any standard Sparql endpoint, so it does not strictly require Semantic MediaWiki. Queries are executed server-side to avoid any cross-region course problem. And moreover, it provides a special page with all magic word documentation. Let's see at the architecture. When a MediaWiki page with the magic word is requested, the server-side script parses the magic word parameters and generate the client-side code that will be executed in the browser. So this code in the browser simply invoke the Sparql endpoints through an API that acts as a proxy, and then render the output data. So the usage in 3 steps. Step number 1, you have to configure in your local settings the Sparql endpoints you want to connect to. Number 2, you can create a wiki page and configure a magic word with all the parameter and your custom Sparql query, and then enjoy the result. An example more in details. In local settings, we can define 1 or more Sparql endpoints. You must assign a unique name, endpoint name. You set the URL. You can configure the credential for basic HTTP authorization, other connection parameters. Moreover, you can define a list of prefixes and namespaces that are automatically added to your query, so you don't have to redefine every time. So step number 1. Step number 2, in a wiki page, I call my magic word. There are some parameters that are common to all the output formats, so like the unique ID, the name of the Sparql endpoints I want to invoke, defined in the local settings, and of course my Sparql query. In this case, we want to show the top 20 countries ordered by population size. There are also extra parameter specific for the output format. And that's an example of the result. So we have China, India, United States, and so on. So next steps, we want to add other useful output format. We want to add a page to test querying configuration like the special ask page. We want to add more interactivity to the graph format. And of course, improving documentation example and to create a suite of unit and integration tests. So these are the references and the links. Feedbacks and suggestions are welcome, so feel free to contribute and write us. Thanks, Bernard, for the first feedbacks. Okay. So we can proceed to the live demo. Okay. So this an enterprise architecture portal based on Semantic MediaWiki. This is the model of categories of our customers. We can go in this category. Okay. I can navigate to this page, which is an informatic resource. In our customer dictionary, an informatic resource is a logical group of applications. We can see with the graph format, we can go through screen. Okay. So this is our object, which is label and category. Okay. And this object has relation to other pages, contains application. Which application? This one, category application, and this one. But our application is composed by application component. This one and the other. Okay. Okay. And this application component runs on host or cluster. Okay, so here the legend to see each category with an icon. I can move the object. I can zoom in and zoom out with the mouse, but I don't have the mouse, so believe me, you can zoom in and zoom out. Okay, and so if I want to see more information about this virtual host, I can simply click on the label and I navigate to the virtual host page with its semantic properties. But I have another point of view directly from the virtual host perspective. So I know that this virtual host is hosted on a physical host. And I can know which application component are deployed on the virtual host, which application, with informatic resources, till the business processes. So a business process involves this informatic resource that is composed of the application, by application component, till the infrastructure. So I can discover that if this host goes down, it has impact on all these business processes. And with a graph visualization, it's immediate to understand.
And this is a typical request from our clients when we talk about IT governance, for example.
Another example is about.
This is a typical request of our clients when we have to deal with the IT governance. So the end-to-end. Okay, I shut down this machine, and what business process is impacted from this?
Another point of view, we start from a business process. And I can see the IT dependencies graph. So this business process involves only one informatic resource and rely on these infrastructural components. So from business process, all the chain to the infrastructure. And these are the graph format, but I can show you also a dashboard of charts. So we have bar charts, another bar chart. We have a tree map, a simple table, a bubble chart. That's all. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing these awesome extensions. I think they are very important for our community also. I have a question regarding the access control. What happens if I'm not a project manager, so I'm not allowed to view the project category pages, but I'm doing an ask query, getting data out of these pages? This will not be prevented, I guess.
No, if you have an ask, we can see the result. But when you want to see the detail and go into the page, you are forbidden, so you can view the page. But at the moment, we have to block the user before they can access a query that can make sure that can show everything about something that he can view.
Just a little point in the configuration. I saw that you list a given set of endpoints, right? In the local settings. So you cannot directly from a page give a given endpoint and give the query to apply upon that endpoint.
At the moment, you have to define before in the local settings.
Okay, but you can put a given list of endpoints or only a single one?
Only a single, no.
No, in the configuration you can make a list of endpoints.
And
then
the
use
magic word you
one
use
of these lists.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a quick question regarding the access, the authentication plugin. Can you lock it down so only so certain users can edit everything, but having certain users so they can only edit the talk pages, the discussion pages?
Oh, about the discussion pages.
Yeah.
Oh, discussion pages is as a namespace specific, and I think that could be managed about using the default permission. So if I say false to view on a page that is not a category specified for a certain group, you can view the discussion page.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. I was just wondering, looking at the enterprise architecture, you've created it in the wiki. Can you import architectures into that wiki? So as in, if you ask a supplier for a specific architecture, can it be imported into the wiki, or do you need to use your notation, the notation that you've created?
We can import, in fact, import many information into the enterprise architecture portal, because the enterprise architecture portal is not the master of this information. We have many sources because the client has many different tools for process, business process, for supplier, for application portfolio management. So we take this information and map all this information to the model into the wiki. So if you have some new repository of data, for example, suppliers, you can import this using a semantic integration tool that we made.
Okay.
A kind of connector that we can put from the source to the MediaWiki.
Okay, I'll have a chat with you later about that.
I have thoughts about both extensions. I guess it's advice which you can take or leave. For the semantic auth profiling one, it seems to me that it would be better to not use Semantic MediaWiki to store that metadata, but rather just have a parser function. Do you know about the page props table in MediaWiki? It's a database table. Anyway, it's often used to store that kind of metadata. So you can have a parser function where it might just take 2 parameters or something for the page admin and the page project manager or something. Right, and so then you could just store those as key value pairs in the page props table and query them, and you'd get the same result. It would be, I think, maybe easier to use. You could have instant error checking, and then, of course, it could be used by people who aren't using Semantic MediaWiki.
Yes. In the first phase, now we have used the file of configuration file and the semantic code, but a nice evolution may be using some table to store this.
Right. Yeah, you can have your own table also, but for the other one, Sparql query format, it seems extremely useful. Actually, it seems so useful that it might be better to have it as an independent JavaScript library and then just have the extension be a thin wrapper around that so that it could be used outside of MediaWiki. I mean, there's nothing really MediaWiki specific about this. Just being able to specify this is the endpoint and this is the result format I want and these are the parameters, that kind of thing. I don't know if you've thought about that, but I mean, there's a lot of non-MediaWiki users who I think could really benefit from this also.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you.
A lot, again. So right now, Marion has prepared exactly 34 amazing plates again. So please rush up and have lunch. And we reconvene in 55 minutes so that we can keep up the schedule in the afternoon at least. Thank you.